Buttermilk biscuits. So all the ingredients have been chilled in the refrigerator. Cold ingredients help the cutting of fat into flour. That's the major baking technique involved here. Here's the buttermilk, butter. It's been broken down into smallish pieces, about medium dice or so. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to mix all of our dry ingredients together. That's AP flour, cake flour, sugar, salt, and baking powder. These ingredients can be sifted together. Whisking them together does a fine job. Cutting fat into flour is also the technique used for making pie crust, any flaky type dough really. So you can see the whisk does a pretty good job of sifting. There's no lumps left. All the powders are mixed thoroughly. So just set that aside. So this is a commercial, almost industrial stand mixer. Paddle, bowl. The paddle attachment is the one you use for cutting fat into flour. Here's your controls here on the right side. This is the speed control. There's 4 speeds, 5 if you count blend. One button starts it, one button stops it. And this is a timer. So if you need to mix something for 5 minutes, set it to 5, or you can put it on hold and it will mix continuously. There's 2 holes machined into the bowl, and those fit over 2 pegs right on the base, and then you give it a slight turn to lock it into place. So put all our powders into the bowl. Again, all these ingredients have been chilled beforehand. The butter. Put the bowl on, lock it in place. There's a channel in the attachments that you slide over a peg, turn it, and it locks into place also. Looks like this particular mixer, the safety cage, is probably getting cleaned or something. The mixer won't run without the cage on and closed. So there's a lever to raise the bowl up. Cage is open. It's not going to work. It's very important to have a safety cage on there. It's a very powerful machine. You don't want anything falling in there. So make sure your timer's set to hold or on a specific time. Your speed is on the appropriate speed. Cage is shut. So the paddle breaks down the fat and coats each little piece with flour. It's been mixing for a little while now. There's still some large pieces of butter in there, a little bit too big for biscuits or pie crust. So we'll let that keep going. Check on it one more time. You're looking for a sort of cornmeal consistency with some pieces the size of peas, or the size of lima beans. So this is pretty good right now. There's just a few pieces that are the size of lima beans. Most of it's the texture of cornmeal. So now we're ready to mix the buttermilk in. Buttermilk is acidic. That's going to cause the baking powder to react, give it its rise. So you'll dust your work surface with a little bit of flour. Just stir this up by hand. You definitely want to do this step by hand and not in the mixer. After the fat and the flour have been cut together, the more mechanical mixing you do, the more gluten production happens, which creates a denser, tougher product, which is okay for bread when you want it to be chewy, but something delicate and flaky like a biscuit, you definitely want to underdevelop those glutens in the flour, which is another reason it's part cake flour and part AP flour. Cake flour has a low amount of gluten protein. Now all the dough is out on the work surface. You don't want to knead it so much or roll it, because that's just going to produce more. It's just going to increase the gluten strand's length. So what we're going to do is semi-laminate it, which is press it down into itself. It's pretty sticky stuff, so it will stick to itself. Fold it once, press it down, and each time you fold it, you're essentially creating another flake in the interior of the biscuit. Also, each of those little beads of butter that were still left floating around in the flour, when those melt, they'll leave a little tiny flake. So you continue to fold this. It is very sticky. I usually put enough flour on it and around it to make it workable. So I usually do about 5 or 6, maybe even 8 folds. You can see where I folded it is going to become another flake in the biscuit. And I'll let the glutens relax for about 10 minutes or so before I cut the portions. So it's relaxed. The flour has definitely hydrated with all of that buttermilk. Using a biscuit cutter, just cut them out, put them on a sheet pan to be baked. You want to get the biscuit cutter as close to the previous cut as possible so your scrap dough left over at the end isn't so large. Just continue around the dough, getting as close to the previous cut as possible. The way you fold it over, similar to making croissants from scratch, except you would put a layer of butter in between each fold, which really creates a large amount of flake. So all this scrap dough can be reshaped and cut into more biscuits. But each time you do this, you get a denser, tougher product. Won't be as consistent as the rest of the tray of biscuits, these last few. This is a regular convection oven. Here's your switch, on, off, cool down for when you're finished using it. Fan speed, low or high. Generally low is enough for most things. Lights, thermostat. When the light turns off, it's preheated. And here's your timer. Biscuits go in. Set your timer. Here's the finished biscuits. Still warm. You can see up close all the different layers. If you pull it apart, it should come right apart where the flakes are at. Very nice.